The richest couple in the world is calling it quits. Amazon chief Jeff Bezos and his wife MacKenzie are divorcing after 25 years. They got married before Bezos founded Amazon and his other.
MacKenzie Scott spent 25 years building Amazon alongside Jeff Bezos. She was there from the garage days, from the first contracts negotiated inside a Barnes & Noble. But in January 2019, she walked away from the world's richest man with $38 billion. There were whispers about a leaked affair, photos sold by a family member, and a phone hack tied to a Saudi prince. But none of that was the real reason she left. At 55, she finally admitted what pushed her out the door. And it started long before any scandal broke. MacKenzie Scott Tuttle entered the world on April 7, 1970, in San Francisco, and her first memories were shaped by the quiet wealth of Pacific Heights. Million-dollar homes lined the streets, and her family lived inside one of them, a mansion with staff and polished floors and rooms that seemed to stretch forever. Her father, Jason Baker Tuttle, handled money for powerful clients, and her mother stayed home, running the household with care and grace. Life moved smoothly back then, with private schools, exclusive clubs, and long summer trips across Europe. Parties filled the house, and polished cars waited outside. Everything around her suggested that this life would continue without interruption, yet the ground beneath her feet was already shifting without warning. By the time she turned 6, writing had already become her refuge. She sat for hours creating a story called The Bookworm, and page by page, it grew until she had written 142 pages. Her parents could hardly believe it, and they kept the manuscript safe because it felt like proof that she carried something rare inside her. Years later, a flood swept through their home and destroyed the only copy. She was still young, but the loss hit her with surprising force, showing her how deeply storytelling had woven itself into her identity. Instead of turning away from writing, she held it even closer, letting it guide her as she grew. Her name carried a shadow of power, too. She had been named after her grandfather, G. Scott Cumming, a high-ranking executive and general counsel at El Paso Natural Gas, one of the biggest energy companies in the country. Stories about him floated through every family gathering, stories about major deals and boardroom decisions and influence that reached across states. As she listened, she absorbed the weight of that legacy, and it shaped her idea of what ambition could look like. She understood early on that the world her family lived in was built on reputation and control, and her name made her part of that world whether she asked for it or not. That world followed her to Connecticut when she was shipped off to the Hotchkiss School. The campus looked like something out of a film. Wide lawns, old stone buildings, and students who arrived in private jets or were picked up by drivers in dark cars. Tuition passed $50,000 a year, a number large enough to create distance all by itself. Her classmates came from families with mansions in multiple cities, and the school's expectations pushed everyone to chase excellence without pause. MacKenzie found herself surrounded by privilege once again, yet something in her felt slightly apart from it, watching as much as participating. Everything changed in 1987. While she studied far from home, the SEC investigated her father for misconduct. The findings were harsh. Words like lavish spending and client losses filled the reports, and the ruling ended his career in the securities industry for good. Overnight, everything they owned began to disappear. Houses, cars, savings, even stability turned into memories. The family fled to Florida with what remained of their dignity, and MacKenzie watched the life she grew up in collapse, like sand slipping through fingers. The fall taught her something she would never forget. Wealth could vanish. Status could shatter. What survived was character. and she would carry that lesson into every part of her life. Her college years revealed the weight of that collapse. At Princeton in the late 1980s, she struggled with tuition so much that by sophomore year she could not cover a $1,000 fee. Her roommate, Jeannie Tarkenton, stepped in and saved her place at the school. To keep herself afloat, MacKenzie cleaned houses and worked tables, counting nickels to make rent and worrying each month about what would come next. She wrote later that the strain shaped her views about generosity because she understood what it felt like to be one small bill away from falling apart. Yet even through exhaustion, she pushed forward, earning her degree in 1992 and planting the first seeds of the philanthropy that would one day become her hallmark. When she arrived at Princeton, she carried a quiet dream. She wanted to learn from Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize-winning author whose books she treated almost like sacred texts. It felt impossible, but she applied anyway. The door opened, and she found herself sitting in Morrison's creative writing class, handing over her drafts with trembling hands. The mentorship grew quickly. Morrison advised her thesis, guided her writing, and gave her an example of a life built on purpose. Letters between them, now preserved in the Firestone Library archives, show how deeply that connection shaped her thinking. For MacKenzie, it felt like finding a light in a very uncertain time. Morrison saw talent in her too. She told colleagues that MacKenzie was one of the best students she had ever taught. By sophomore year, MacKenzie was already bringing drafts to Morrison that felt unusually full and expressive. The praise was rare. Morrison's standards were high, and she did not offer compliments lightly. Their bond continued long after graduation, and Morrison even edited the manuscript that would later become MacKenzie's first published novel. These years sharpened her voice and strengthened her resilience, giving her tools she would use long after she left Princeton behind. Her senior thesis in 1992 stretched to 168 pages and carried the title, The Fathering Water. The story followed Luther Augury, an engineer hiding the truth about losing his job while trying to hold his family together. The themes of pressure, silence, and hidden struggle echoed parts of her own life, and Morrison helped her refine every chapter. Years later, she would turn that thesis into the novel The Testing of Luther Albright, a book that took nearly a decade to complete. The work connected her early experiences with the life she would eventually live, showing how intimately she understood the tension between appearance and reality. But when she moved to New York after graduation, the world hit her hard. She worked as a waitress, believing she could write during her free hours, yet exhaustion crushed her every night. She wrote to Morrison about the monotony of making sandwiches and worrying about rent, describing how she collapsed from tiredness before even opening her notebook. Just 1 week into that routine, she accepted a job at D.E. Shaw, a decision that changed everything. Her time in the restaurant left her with a deep empathy for people trying to survive while holding on to dreams, and she carried that understanding into her future philanthropy. In 1992, she needed a new path and applied for a research associate position at D.E. Shaw. She asked Toni Morrison for a recommendation, hoping it might help her stand out. Morrison's praise carried such force that when the hiring manager, Jeff Bezos, read it, he listened. The letter and phone call left an impression strong enough that he brought her in immediately. This moment, preserved in the Morrison archives since 2014, became the first step in a future no one could have imagined. Jeff Bezos himself interviewed her. He was a senior vice president at the time, sharp, analytical, and forward-thinking. During the interview, he saw something in her that went beyond qualifications, something quick and thoughtful that held his attention. He hired her on the spot. That decision began a partnership that would stretch far beyond office walls. Their offices sat side by side. All day, MacKenzie heard Jeff's loud and unmistakable laugh coming through the wall. It filled the hallway and became something she looked forward to without even realizing it. She later said it was impossible not to fall for someone with a laugh like that. That simple sound nudged them toward each other, and soon their conversations moved from work to life. The connection grew quickly. After just 3 months of dating, Jeff proposed. People around them were stunned by the speed, yet to them it felt natural. Within 6 months of their first date, they were married. Jeff once said he wanted a partner who could help him survive anything, even a third-world prison, and he believed MacKenzie was that person. Their whirlwind union would lead them toward a future filled with risk, ambition, and transformation. By 1994, they both walked away from their well-paid jobs at D.E. Shaw. They packed their car, left New York, and drove to Seattle with the plan for an online bookstore written out during the trip. Online shopping barely existed, and their friends thought they were stepping into a storm with no map. MacKenzie set aside her writing dreams to support the idea fully. Seattle felt far from Wall Street, but Jeff believed it held the right energy for building something new. Their choice marked the true beginning of what Amazon would become. MacKenzie became Amazon's first employee. She worked in their small garage office, preparing orders, writing checks, managing accounts, and helping keep the company alive during its earliest struggles. Her role was not symbolic, it was essential. She helped build the foundation that carried Amazon into its next phase. While Jeff refined the technology, she handled logistics from a Starbucks cafe inside a Barnes & Noble. There, surrounded by bookshelves, she negotiated Amazon's first freight contracts with shipping companies. These early deals kept orders moving and helped customers trust the new company. The contrast between building an online bookstore inside a physical bookstore never failed to amuse her. She helped plan nearly everything at the start. She shaped the early business model, took part in choosing the name Amazon, and set up the first accounting system. When Jeff's idea for the name Cadabra fell apart because it sounded too much like cadaver, she helped push toward a stronger choice inspired by the largest river in the world. Her fingerprints touched every early decision. Yet even after all of that, there was no prenup, no co-founder title, and no recognition equal to her work. Because they married before Amazon existed, the company defaulted legally to Jeff. Under Washington state law, they shared assets, but the public narrative rarely included her. When they divorced in 2019, she received about 4% of Amazon, valued around $38,000 at that time. Yet her early role still remained quiet in the shadows. MacKenzie Scott stepped into a life where family came first, long before anyone outside Seattle even knew her name. From 2000 to 2006, she had 3 sons and adopted a daughter. And while Jeff Bezos built Amazon into a giant, she became the one holding everything together at home. In the early years of Amazon, she handled accounting, shipping, and even contract talks. And she did all this while keeping 4 young children steady. As the company grew, she quietly stepped back and let the world focus on Jeff, while she focused on her kids. She moved cross-country with the family, kept the children away from cameras, and built a home that tried to feel normal even though their bank account said otherwise. She taught them Mandarin, played with kitchen chemistry, introduced Singapore math, and refused to hide them from other kids because of wealth. Every choice she made put her own dreams on pause. And she did it because she believed their childhood needed her more than Amazon did. Her dreams never fully disappeared, though. She had started writing her first novel in the mid-1990s, but she needed 10 full years to finish it because everything at home and everything at Amazon kept pulling her away. She wrote The Testing of Luther Albright, while handling early Amazon finances, helping with logistics, and raising 4 children who always came first. By the time the book finally came out in 2005, she had poured a decade of early mornings, late nights, and in-between moments into it. Toni Morrison praised it, calling it rare and powerful, and said it broke the heart in a quiet way. MacKenzie later explained that she did not delay the book because she lacked ideas. She delayed it because real life left her almost no space to sit alone and write. Only when her children grew older did she find enough stillness to complete the story she had carried for years. When the book won the American Book Award in 2006, it should have been a defining moment. Instead, almost no one noticed. The novel was chosen as a Los Angeles Times Book of the Year. Morrison praised it again, and the award confirmed her place as a serious writer. Still, the headlines ignored her. Most people only saw her as Jeff Bezos' wife, and the win sank under the weight of his growing public presence. Other winners that year were celebrated, but her victory stayed in the shadows. Even years later, many people did not realize she was an accomplished novelist long before she became a billionaire philanthropist. Her talent lived quietly behind the world's loudest company. In 2013, she released her second novel, Traps. Critics admired it, but the sales were small. Bookscan tracked the numbers and called them modest, and once again, the public focused more on her last name than on the story she had written. She had trained under Toni Morrison at Princeton, yet her work rarely got to stand alone. Her books arrived in a world that always tied her identity to Jeff's fortune, and even good reviews could not cut through that. Her experience showed how women connected to powerful men often have their achievements flattened or erased in the public mind. That same year, Vogue published an interview that seemed sweet on the surface. She described Jeff as outgoing and herself as quiet, and she said their personalities balanced each other. At the time, people smiled at the contrast. Later, readers went back to that interview and felt something different under the surface. Her words about staying quiet and taking a step back sounded less like charm and more like a woman trying to explain how small she often felt in a marriage lived under a spotlight. She talked about keeping her children hidden from fame and about wanting privacy. But tucked inside those lines was a loneliness that no one picked up on until the divorce arrived years later. On January 9, 2019, Jeff and MacKenzie released a joint message on Jeff's Twitter account announcing their divorce after 25 years together. It said they had gone through a long period of reflection and decided to remain friends. The timing looked calm, but it was anything but calm behind the scenes. The announcement went out just 3 days before Jeff's 55th birthday, and right before the National Enquirer was about to publish an exposé about his affair with Lauren Sanchez. By posting the news first, Jeff tried to control the story and soften the impact. At the time, his net worth hovered around $160,000, which meant the split would become the most expensive divorce ever recorded. Everyone knew MacKenzie would receive a massive share of Amazon stock, but no one yet knew how massive. Just 1 day later, on January 10, 2019, the National Enquirer released everything they had. They published romantic texts, private photos, and messages the world was never meant to read. They said some images were too explicit to print. One message calling Lauren a live girl spread everywhere in minutes. The leak was not just embarrassing, it was targeted. Jeff believed the tabloid wanted him to stop digging into how they got the material. They even threatened to release more private content if he kept investigating. The timing made the world suspect that the divorce announcement had been rushed to get in front of the scandal. Jeff's choice to announce early meant MacKenzie barely had any time to prepare for the public storm. Reporters later confirmed that the announcement was a preemptive strike meant to shape the narrative before the tabloid did. It showed Jeff's instinct for crisis management and also revealed how brutal public exposure could feel. The world was watching, and neither of them had room to breathe. Then came the revelation that the texts and photos had come from inside Lauren Sanchez's own family. Her brother, Michael Sanchez, had taken the private messages and shirtless photos she had sent him in 2018 and sold them to the National Enquirer for about $200,000. That sale turned a private affair into a global story. It raised questions about loyalty, about money, and about how far some people would go for a payout. Jeff accused the Enquirer of blackmail and extortion, and the legal battle only grew louder. At the same time, an even stranger theory began spreading. 8 months before the scandal, in May 2018, Jeff's phone had reportedly been hacked through WhatsApp by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Investigators said the hack happened after the Crown Prince sent a video file that carried malware. The attack allegedly pulled huge amounts of data from Jeff's phone. Forensic teams said they had medium to high confidence that the Saudi government was involved. Jeff believed the hack and the tabloid leak might be connected to attempts to pressure the Washington Post, which he owned and which had reported critically on Saudi Arabia. The United Nations called for an investigation, and the case became a mix of celebrity scandal, cyber espionage, and global politics. By April 4, 2019, just 3 months after the announcement, the divorce was finalized. It moved with incredible speed for a settlement worth $38,000. Almost all of it came in Amazon stock. The speed stunned legal experts. High-value divorces usually take years of negotiations, but MacKenzie wanted a clean break and refused to drag the process out. The value of the settlement matched Amazon's stock price at the time, which hovered around $1,800 per share, and her 96,000 shares instantly changed her life. Her stake represented 25% of the Amazon shares she and Jeff had owned together, about 4% of the entire company. At roughly $1,813 per share, her holdings sat between $35,600,000 and $38,000. Overnight, she became one of the wealthiest people alive. Jeff kept 75% of their Amazon stock and, more importantly, maintained all voting control. She did not fight for voting rights and even gave up all interests in the Washington Post and Blue Origin. Her choice surprised financial experts because divorces of this scale usually involve long battles over control. She simply stepped away. On April 4, 2019, the same day the divorce became official, she posted a short message on Twitter. She said she was grateful to finish the process and happy to give Jeff her interest in Blue Origin, the Washington Post, and 75% of their Amazon stock. The message carried no bitterness and no drama. People around the world commented on how rare that tone was. Her words matched the grace she had shown through the entire process and hinted at the philanthropic journey she soon began. MacKenzie Scott signed the Giving Pledge only 1 month after her divorce from Jeff Bezos became final in May 2019, and the timing made the whole world pause for a moment because she had just received a $38,000 for Amazon stake in the settlement. Overnight, she became one of the richest women alive. Yet instead of stepping into a life built around guarding wealth, she made a promise to give most of it away during her lifetime. She said she would keep giving until the safe was empty. And that line carried a quiet weight, because it showed how different her path would be from Jeff's. The pledge itself was not legally binding, but her actions made it feel stronger than any contract, since she kept giving at a speed that surprised even the most seasoned philanthropists. Her decision marked the start of something new, where the focus shifted from public praise toward quiet impact, and that shift kept pulling more attention toward the way she gave, rather than the size of her fortune. Since 2019, MacKenzie Scott has given $26,300,000 to more than 2,300 organizations, and the pace of it almost feels unreal when you follow the numbers. In 2025 alone, she gave $7,100,000, pushing her total for just a few years close to $10,000 in annual giving. Her gifts changed nonprofits overnight because they came without restrictions, and many organizations suddenly found themselves with budgets doubled or even tripled in a single moment. In 2020, she sent out $700,000 to 116 organizations focused on racial equality, LGBTQ+ rights, and climate work. And she did it without asking for proposals or reports. She studied them on her own, picked the ones she believed in, and then surprised them with life-changing amounts. This style turned her into one of the most respected givers in the world, not because of the sums, but because she gave trust along with the money. Her attention often moved toward groups that supported people who rarely had a voice. She reached victims of domestic violence, racial justice movements, press freedom organizations, and smaller nonprofits that barely survived year to year. She gave more than $275,000 to the National Domestic Violence Hotline and women's shelters, helping them expand in ways they once thought impossible. In 2024, she directed around $137,000 toward California-based groups, including multiple LGBTQ+ organizations such as the LGBTQ Center Long Beach. She also backed Native American communities, sending multi-million-dollar support to Native Americans in philanthropy, giving them room to design their own solutions. Her research process remained quiet and careful, helped by groups like Lever for Change, which sifted through more than 6,000 applicants to identify meaningful work. Her choices showed again and again that she wanted her money to touch the people who felt unseen. In November 2025, her giving reached another milestone when she sent $276,000 to 5 historically black colleges and universities. North Carolina A&T received $63,000, and Bowie State University received $50,000, both the largest gifts in their histories. Prairie View A&M University also received $63,000, surpassing the $50,000 she had already given them in 2020. Leaders described the gifts as defining and transformative because they allowed long-term investment in research, innovation, and financial aid. With this round of giving, her total contributions to HBCUs crossed the $500 million mark, strengthening schools that had carried generations of students with limited resources. These gifts began reshaping endowments and giving students a richer path forward, showing again how much change can happen when money arrives without conditions. All of this moved through her organization, Yield Giving, which she built to keep the attention away from herself. Yield Giving did not chase publicity, did not hold press conferences, and rarely accepted interviews. Her only message in 2024 was a simple online note listing 361 community-led groups that received support. Her giving structure, an LLC called Lost Horse, avoided mandatory disclosures, which allowed her to maintain privacy while staying focused on impact. She explained that she wanted the spotlight to fall on the organizations, not on her name. This made her one of the quietest billionaires in the world, yet also one of the most influential, because her silence never slowed the scale of what she gave. She met Dan Jewett in 2019 at Lakeside School in Seattle, a setting far removed from the noise of corporate boardrooms. He taught chemistry there, and her children were students, so their connection started in the simple rhythm of school days. People later pointed out how different he seemed from Jeff Bezos, since Dan lived a life shaped by education rather than business, and his calm presence contrasted with the intensity of the tech world. Their relationship began outside of money and power, which made the pairing feel refreshingly ordinary at a time when Scott's fortune made her anything but ordinary. They married quietly in March 2021, and the world learned about it when Dan wrote a warm letter for the Giving Pledge website. In it, he shared that he had married someone deeply generous, and that he was joining her in the commitment to pass on enormous wealth to help others. This moment placed him next to her in a mission already marked by more than $12,000 in donations since 2019. His name appeared beside hers on the Giving Pledge, and many nonprofits thanked both of them in their announcements. Their partnership was described as a union built around both marriage and philanthropy, one that felt grounded in purpose as much as affection. Dan's involvement in philanthropy grew throughout 2021, and for a while he stood beside her in the public eye as part of her giving efforts. Then, late in 2022, something shifted quietly. His name and photo vanished from the Giving Pledge website, and mentions of him disappeared from public communications. Nonprofits stopped including him in their acknowledgments. There was no official explanation, but the sudden change raised questions about their marriage and how it might affect the work they shared. On September 26, 2022, MacKenzie Scott filed for divorce in King County Superior Court. The filing said spousal support was not needed, and that both had signed a separation contract that set out how property and debts would be handled. The process ended quickly on January 4, 2023, with no public fight and no contested hearings. The speed surprised many observers because billionaire divorces usually stretch on for months or years. The lack of public details made people even more curious, since the separation contract stayed sealed and nothing more than the basics appeared in court records. After the divorce, mentions of Dan disappeared almost completely from Scott's online presence. Her author page changed. Her philanthropic sites changed. Nonprofits that once thanked both of them now spoke only of her. The quietness of it all invited speculation about whether there had been a prenuptial agreement or other private arrangements. The truth stayed behind closed doors, giving this split a sense of mystery that set it apart from other high-profile divorces. By November 2025, MacKenzie Scott's net worth hovered between $34,000 and $40,000. This placed her among the richest people in the world, even though she had already given away $26,000 since 2019. Her Amazon shares kept rising in value faster than she could donate them, which created a strange paradox where she grew wealthier in the same years she gave billions. In 2025 alone, her fortune increased by nearly $5,000, despite giving $7,100,000 to nonprofits. On some days, she earned around $41,000, a number that showed just how enormous her stake in Amazon remained. Her wealth reached levels comparable to the GDP of smaller nations, making her one of the most unusual figures in modern philanthropy, a person who kept getting richer, even as she emptied her safe as fast as she could. Her giving continued at a scale that shocked people. In 2025, she donated more than the full annual budgets of some countries. CamFed, an African girls' education organization, received 4 major gifts from her, including $60,000 in 2025 alone. Her focus held steady on groups helping women, students, Native communities, and people pushed to the edges of society. She did not build a giant foundation, did not staff up a large office, and did not create complicated programs. She simply moved money into the hands of people doing the work, trusting they would know how to use it. Behind all this was a deeper reason tied to her own life. Her divorce from Jeff Bezos in 2019 was not only a personal split, but a turning point in how she wanted to live. At 23, she had pressed pause on her writing career to help Jeff build Amazon, and as the company exploded, She often felt her own identity slipping into the background. Jeff worked long hours, sometimes through the night, and she carried the weight of the home, the children, and her own unrealized ambitions. After their third child, she admitted she could not be the writer she wanted while living inside the demands of Jeff's world. 25 years later, she finally stepped out of that shadow. She walked away with her share of Amazon, revived her writing, and began giving in ways that reflected who she wanted to be. By 55, MacKenzie Scott had become something rare. She was a billionaire who stayed silent, a philanthropist who kept giving without asking for recognition, and a woman who rebuilt her life through purpose instead of power. Her story kept unfolding through her actions, not her words, creating a kind of quiet influence that reshaped thousands of organizations and touched millions of lives.